Deborah Bradley said she jolted awake to the sound of her son crying, a sharp, uneasy wail that cut through the early morning quiet. She reached for the clock, trying to make sense of the hour, and felt a cold jolt of panic when she realized the house felt too still. Her daughter's room sat just down the hallway, dim and quiet, the door slightly cracked the way she always left it. But when she stepped inside and her eyes adjusted to the soft spill of a nightlight, the crib was empty. The pink blanket folded along the rail hadn't moved. The stuffed toy tucked at the corner sat exactly where it always did. 10-month-old Lisa Irwin was gone. Deborah's voice shook as she called for her fiancé, Jeremy Irwin, who had just returned home from an overnight shift as an electrician. He ran room to room, pushing open doors, switching on lights, trying to convince himself their daughter had crawled somewhere impossible. But the house didn't show the usual signs of a restless baby. The crib hadn't shifted. The floor held no footprints or dropped toys. The window above the crib stood closed, yet one of the screens on the home's exterior looked tampered with, bent in a way he swore hadn't been there the day before. He grabbed his phone to call 911 and realized something strange. 3 cell phones, his, Deborah's, and one of the older kids, were missing from the kitchen counter. The chargers were still plugged in, dangling wires hanging loose. It made no sense to him. He didn't remember taking them, and Deborah insisted she hadn't either. Police arrived minutes later and began treating the house as a crime scene. Officers checked the windows, doors, and yard. They noted the bent screen and the fact that a stray neighbor's cat had triggered a backyard spotlight earlier in the night. They questioned the couple about the timeline, what they had done the night before, who had been in the house, and whether anyone might want to harm the family. Every answer created more questions. The parents felt as if they were being pulled into a maze where each turn made the truth harder to articulate. Detectives learned that Deborah had been drinking with a neighbor on the evening of October 3rd and had put Lisa to bed earlier than usual. She said she last saw her daughter around 6:40 p.m. She admitted she drank enough wine that she couldn't recall the night clearly. That single admission became a wedge that widened quickly. Investigators pressed her, asking whether she had blacked out, whether she had forgotten something, whether the baby had been injured. Jeremy tried to shield her, insisting the house had been locked and that a stranger must have slipped inside while he was gone. Police began searching the neighborhood, knocking on doors, asking residents if they had seen anyone carrying a baby or acting suspiciously. Some neighbors claimed they saw a man walking down the street late at night holding a child who didn't look quite right, too still, too limp. The sighting unsettled investigators, but no one could describe the man clearly enough to recreate his face. Another neighbor reported seeing a billowing fire in an alleyway, sparks rising as if someone burned something large. Officers checked the area the next morning and found melted plastic, but nothing to confirm what had been destroyed. Back inside the home, crime scene technicians dusted for prints and gathered anything that might explain how a stranger could enter without waking anyone. They found no signs of forced entry, no footprints on the floor, nothing broken, no dirt dragged inside. The house looked undisturbed except for the missing child and the missing phones. Those phones became a strange, persistent problem. Records showed attempted calls placed from one of them after midnight, including a disconnected call to a number Deborah and Jeremy didn't recognize. Investigators traced the recipient and found a young woman who insisted she didn't know anything about the family and had no reason to be involved. Police never fully explained why the calls went out or who made them. As the hours stretched into days, the initial search widened. Crews dragged nearby creeks, combed through wooded areas, checked drainage ditches, and searched abandoned homes. Helicopters scanned the area with infrared equipment. Officers dug through neighborhood dumpsters and checked construction sites. No trace of Lisa surfaced. Media coverage exploded. Cameras lined the street. Reporters pressed for answers that didn't exist. The pressure pushed the family into a defensive posture. Deborah wept in interviews and said she felt she was being treated like a suspect instead of a mother in crisis. She failed a portion of a polygraph test, though police never explained which part. Jeremy refused to accept that the story had shifted from a search and rescue mission into a portrait of suspicion directed at the people who lived inside the home. Tips flooded in. Some callers claimed they saw a baby who looked like Lisa in stores, parking lots, or rest areas across Missouri. Others reported suspicious individuals carrying infants in public. Police checked every tip, but none panned out. A homeless man who often wandered the area became a temporary focus when someone suggested he might have slipped into the neighborhood and taken the child. Officers questioned him extensively, but he had no connection to the family and no signs of involvement. The case gathered more confusion when a local handyman admitted he had been near the house that night, but insisted he wasn't involved and had only walked through the neighborhood because he couldn't sleep. His story shifted as reporters questioned him, but investigators eventually said they found no evidence tying him to the disappearance. Deborah and Jeremy kept begging the public for help. They appeared on national television, pleading for the return of their daughter, describing her as a happy, curious baby who loved being held and rocked to sleep. But the more they appeared on camera, the more scrutiny they attracted. The public debated every detail: why Deborah had been drinking, why the phones were missing, why there were no signs of a break-in. The family felt trapped between their grief and a growing wall of speculation they couldn't break down. Months passed. The searches slowed. Leads dried up. Winter settled over Kansas City, and the bedroom where Lisa once slept remained unchanged, crib untouched, toys still arranged the way they had been that night. Her parents refused to move anything. They said they wanted the room preserved for when she came home. Years later, investigators acknowledged the case remained open but had reached a standstill. They said they couldn't prove an intruder entered the home, and they couldn't prove the parents were involved. Every theory collapsed under its own weight. A stranger abduction seemed unlikely without evidence of entry. An accident inside the home had no clear signs. The missing phones remained an unsolved detail that complicated every angle. Through it all, one fact remained fixed. A 10-month-old girl vanished from her crib in the middle of the night, leaving behind silence, suspicion, and a trail of pieces that never formed a full picture. Her family continued to hope for a call, a sighting, anything that might break the stalemate that defined the search for their daughter. But as the years stretched on, the case became one of Missouri's most haunting unresolved disappearances, a story frozen at the point where answers should have begun and never did. Thank you for listening to The Lantern's Tale. Subscribe for more true stories if you dare.